Hello, just in case this wasn't clear from the mailing list, the actual chairs, I'm just a standing chair for the first half hour. The actual chairs cannot be here before 1/2 past. So we have half an hour time for general hallway discussions. And yeah, we just should keep in mind that this is being recorded. So the best thing we can use this time for is doing discussions that we actually want to record. So on the agenda for the actual working group meeting, we have a discussion about CDDL 2.0. And given that we only have half an hour and 2 items on the agenda, or actually 3 together with the IETF 116 agenda, one thing we could look at is the remaining slides that I want to use for the CDDL 2.0 discussion. So everybody who thinks that's a good thing to do with the first 10 minutes or so, please raise your hand. So can people actually hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Good. So anything else we should be discussing? So Marco, thank you for note-taking. So since nothing else has been proposed, let me just quickly go through the the module structure implementation that we now have, and that is described in the CDDL2 draft. And just as a reminder, the objective was to be able, there's a spurious line, to be able to construct CDDL from multiple files within a CDDL project. So if you have something complicated like Corim, which is built out of several files, you can essentially do an include. But also, very importantly, the ability to use existing CDL as a library, which is the import keyword. And 2 functions that both of these have is you can put included or imported CDL into a namespace. So you can use multiple libraries that may have conflicting names by adding a namespace to them. And you also can limit the import to specific names. So those were the objectives. That's a very small set of objectives. I'm not saying that we are done when we have done this, but these are the objectives that the current prototype is providing. And yeah, I'm going to go through a couple of examples here. So on the left side, you see a command line that is used to actually call the tool, and in this case 2 lines of actual CBOR of actually CDDL. One is a CDDL rule that is actually CDDL1, and one is an import directive, which is what we are adding here in this CDDL2 iteration. So in this case, the CDDL is very short. It just says the start production is COSI key. And apart from that, we are importing everything we need from RFC 9052. So the tool actually copies the start equals COSI key, and then it looks into RFC 9052 for any rules that we might want to use, because COSI key apparently is not defined at this point in time in this CDL module. So from the RFC 9052 module, it's going to get the COSI key rule. And now that rule again has requirements for the two rules, label and values, and those actually can be found in RFC 9052. So these are then recursively copied over. So the thing you see on the right-hand side is exactly what the CDLC tool produces. So this can then be processed by a CDL1 tool, like the original CDL tool or CDL CodeGen or whatever you are using. So that's a simple case. When we have the problem that what we are importing might be conflicting, so for instance, we might be in a piece of CBOR that has its own idea of CDL, that has its own idea of what a label or what values are, you can embellish the import statement with as a name. So in this case, we use lowercase COSI as a name. I don't have a feeling what the conventions should be here, but this is the example I have. So you can say import RFC 9052 as COSI, and then you essentially get the same thing that we had on the previous slide, except that every name is prefixed by COSI. And that's why the first line of the example also is changed, which now says start equals COSI.COSI key, because there is no COSI key anymore. There is only COSI.COSI key. So that's what the start rule actually pulls in from RFC 9052. So these would be very typical ways of using an existing CDL model as a library, pulling in parts of that, not necessarily the entire thing. So you have a lean result that you can push into your CDL1 tool. Now, you don't necessarily always want to import or include everything that is currently undefined in your CDL. You want to be very specific about what you pull, and you can do this by adding a from clause, which is preceded by a number of names. So in the first example on the slide, we would say we include label and values from RFC 9052, and then we get exactly those two rules included. And of course, we can do that namespaced again. So if we include as COSI, this is getting a bit small type, I'm sorry, we get what is on the lower right side of the slide. So the explicit names give you more control over what you actually get from the library or from the file that you are including in this case. Yeah, and explicit names also use the transitive closure mechanism. Now it's getting really small. So if you say import COSI.empty of serialized map from RFC 9052 as COSI, then you get the below. First of all, the one rule that also was in the CDL file with my data is just copied verbatim, or actually not quite verbatim. You can see that there is some processing going on here, but the result is supposed to be equivalent. And then the tool pulls empty or serialized map from the library, prefixes that with COSI, and then there are further things it needs to pull, including header map, generic headers, label, and values, which are again prefixed by the name given. So the as COSI turns empty or serialized map into COSI.empty or serialized map, and so on. So this is again a lot of automatics that gives you exactly what you need in a particular context. And there is one more little feature which is a convenience. I think we can discuss whether that's useful, but we discussed it in the design team meeting, so I implemented that as well. This is almost the same as the previous slide, except that empty or serialized map now also is aliased. So the second line of the result essentially is an alias rule. Empty or serialized map is an alias for COSI.empty or serialized map, and that is also automatically generated. So you can just say, I want to use RFC 9052 as a library with a prefix COSI, but the things that I specifically import should be in my namespace and not just in the COSI namespace. So in this case, they are in both namespaces. And the final thing is the ability to do some of this from the command line. So if you actually don't want to write up a file that contains the CDDL that has the import statement, then you can use -I for import or -I for include. And COSI equals just means import RFC 9052 as COSI. And you also can have automatically generated start rules. So the scosi.cosi underscore key becomes the rule on the lower left of the slide. So if you run this, you get a result that is on the right-hand side of the slide. And that's often really useful to be able to simply pull out one name from a piece of CDL, not just a library, but also code that you're actually writing right now, a model you're designing, and just pull out that one rule and generate the CDDL, all the CDDL that is needed to make this thing useful for validation. Okay, that's a quick overview I wanted to give. Again, for those coming later, we are in the hallway part of the meeting because the actual chair is only going to come in at 15:30 UTC in 16 minutes. So we thought we might want to use the time here for some discussion. So is there any question or comment on what I have shown?
Yes, thanks for all the hard work.
So do you think this will be useful for you?
It seems to have all the capabilities I'm used to. You know,
Good.
with the various other tools with other languages.
Great. So it would be good to get feedback from people who actually have tried to use this for something useful, whether it solves their problems. Chris.
So I've been trying to use this And this isn't directly related to what you were talking about, but there's little enough conversation. I think I'll bring it up. One of the challenges I'm running into is actually very close to what's on your screen. So you talk about you're defining cozy key right there, and you can imagine a scenario where you have lots of other drafts that are trying to define new values for that cozy key. And it seems like the right way to do this is with the cut syntax, right? So you would say, right now you have optional 2 points to bster, right? It would be more correct to use the cut notation for 2 to bster. But I run into composability problems there, where it's hard to refer to another area. It's not as clear as I would like it to be how to define new keys and values for an existing object. And maybe that's worth thinking about.
Yeah, definitely. That is something that most of us have experienced, and we currently use crutches like this star COSI label, arrow COSI values, but that of course doesn't allow us to specify what exactly that is. So COSI value equals any is not what you want to have. So composing a map out of different library sources, that's definitely something that we are not supporting very well at this point.
Yeah, and you're right. This works fine as a workaround. It just feels like there might be a clearer solution at some point.
Well, the solution that most people who are building larger things are using right now is to actually use a socket in place of COSI label arrow COSI values and have things add to that socket. Now that's something that my implementation of the CDL2 functionality doesn't fully support yet. So that's the one big to-do I have on my list to do a socket. The reason I haven't shown a socket here is that I was just using RFC 9052 as a convenient library that everyone probably knows a little bit about. So RFC 9052 doesn't have that socket convention in it. I could have used something like Corim or Coswid or one of the complicated specifications for that. So I think that's a very good comment and definitely something we should be working on.
Thanks.
What have you specifically been trying to put together?
So the this one is actually work outside the IETF, but we're working with the CTA to develop a common access token, and that access token is built on CWTs, and we are attempting to we're gonna, as part of the specification, we're gonna define all of the CBOR for all of the COSI elements. And for some of them, we can just reference the other specifications that define them. And then for other ones, we have to define them ourselves, which was another thing that is a little bit odd in the specification, is that there are a lot of these elements that are not already defined in CDDL, but are defined in prose. But in order to have a complete CDDL document that could be validated, we effectively have to provide CDDL for things that are defined in other documents, and that feels weird, but
yeah.
It's also reasonably doable. You can stick it in an appendix, and it's useful.
So what I have started putting together is a draft called RFC CDDL models, which is essentially pulling in those models from the various RFCs that already have published CDDL, and it's not complete at this point in time, but it's just a start. And kind of make them more integratable by removing things that are examples, adding things like these sockets I have talked about. So the objective of this draft is to essentially build a collection of referenceable models that work better for integrating them with models that use these models. So that's maybe something that we want to pay a little bit more attention to. So if you have any RFC-based models where you already are starting to add the right connections, I would definitely be interested in getting those as input for this RFC, for this draft.
Certainly, I'll take a look at it. Trying to see if on this list, if you have there's a draft out there that's collecting all of the definitions for commonly used things that includes the alternatives format. Where is that in development? That's not CDDL, that's just CBOR.
Yeah.
Let me pull up the draft. It's the one with alternatives in it.
So I should stop sharing my screen so you can share yours.
Oh, it's notable tags. There we go.
Yeah.
I was just, yeah. Notable tags is an expired draft at the moment. I was just wondering if the plan was to continue work on it.
Definitely. And I think the idea to make sure that we have referenceable CDDL wherever that makes sense for one of these drafts, that's great input.
So one of the things one of the things I have observed is odd, and you can tell me to stop talking if we have the right people to begin the meeting proper. But one of the things I'm finding that's a little bit odd is that in CBOR, we have a number of registrations that register things that are defined in drafts. And it makes it confusing in terms of implementation and the ability to use those in other drafts. Because the registration of something, even in a draft, suggests that you shouldn't register another thing that's almost identical, right?
Yeah, if you can use the registration, you should keep with that. So let me just give an example how we dealt with that recently. There has been a tag 38 around for almost a decade now that tells you how to provide language tag information with some CBOR text string. And that was essentially just a GitHub repo. It wasn't even an internet draft that defined that thing. And recently we needed that in an RFC, in the concise problem details document, RFC 9290. And we found that we actually have to extend this a little bit because the original work didn't address directionality, so right to left, left to right. So we asked the original registrant whether we could pull his registration in to this RFC, which we have done. So this is maybe the high maintenance end of that spectrum, but that's something you can do. Of course, if the original registrant has vanished or is not cooperating, that's maybe a bit worse. But yeah, depending on the license, you might simply be able to copy that thing or reference the notable tags draft. But yes, it's we don't really have a good way in the IETF to reference registered components as a normative part of a specification. And we have to handle those as down-ref type things each time we do it, which is maybe the best we can do. I don't know. It should be easier.
Yeah. It's a lot. The registry for CBOR is a lot lower friction, and I think that's a good thing on average, on the whole, for participation. But it definitely does have some other have some reusability impacts.
Yeah. So what I tried to start with the notable tags work, and I wish I had been able to put more time into that, is to have something like an on-ramp where we continue to make them more interesting, more useful, more reusable tag definitions, more accessible, and explain, for instance, their area of application, which the original registrations often don't. And that would be something that we could move forward. One question here is, of course, is this something the working group should control, or is this something that actually works best as an individual draft, because you can be much more opinionated in an individual draft?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it would depend on the tag. The one that I'm running into the problem with, I sent an email to the list, and I'll follow up at some point. It's the coordinate reference system tag.
Yeah. So have you done anything to actually find the original registrant?
Yeah, I've sent them an email. That's about all I've got. I sent him an email before I sent an email to the list to see if I could talk to him, but I have received no response. I was hoping kind of that posting on the list would result in the original registrant popping up, because it was registered originally as a draft intended to the attention of the working group. So
yeah, so I think I replied to that we maybe should make a little bit more attempt to find the original registrant, but if that doesn't work, we can still use his work as input for a new draft. Yeah, the interesting thing about this CRS thing itself is that it is pulling in a standard from an entirely different universe that has its own representation format and so on.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No, one of the things that we're doing a number of places with this token that I'm working on elsewhere is that there's a ton of pulling in additional work from different groups and kind of putting it together so that nobody's reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Yeah, let's try to work on the CIS thing. I think it would be good to have a community of people work on this and not just a single author, but we should try to find him first, and only steal this work when we have to give up on that. Good, I think we have 15:30, and I see Christian.
Yes, I'm here. Thanks for keeping things running here so far. Is there anything that you kind of I'm still only skimming through the notes. Is there anything that you would like to wrap up on those topics, or are there outcomes that we can go through in the next half hour anyway?
Well, we had some useful feedback on the examples. So I showed the examples from these slides, starting with slide 3. But we probably should discuss the working group view of this as well. So I think we have recorded those feedback items in the notes. I'm not sure we have to revisit them.
No, probably not. So things that have been discussed now are basically CDDL2, basically the CDDL2 roadmap.
Yes, but Chris has made several points that are kind of tributaries to this stream. And I think it's good to be remembered, to be reminded that we actually have to address these other issues as well. So, for instance, the composability of maps was one of the items we discussed, and the fact that we have easy registration for things like tags, but then it's not always clear how this is further evolved.
Yeah.
So both are not in the current CDL2 plan that I was going to present.
Sounds like CDL2 is getting better.
I hope.
Okay. So basically picking up here in the middle, and going through agenda items. Quite frankly, can you just continue? Can you just continue where you left off? Because
yeah, let's go through the agenda quickly, because there is one item there, time tag, that I would like to quickly talk about, and then we can go back to CDL2. So the problem with time tag is we have a pretty complete document from my point of view. We have one problem that came up in the discussion half an hour ago, which is that the CDDL inside this document isn't as complete as it could be. So that's half solved right now, but it's only half solved. But the more interesting thing we are stuck on is that this is supposed to be in a cluster with a CDate work, and that has been submitted to the ISG quite a few months ago, and it's not quite clear how this is moving forward. So we cannot. Well, we can just submit our work and let the ISG figure it out, but maybe it's better to actually work on this in the working group until we fully understand what will happen with CDate. So that's at least slowing me down. At some point we may have to give up on waiting for that, but not sure we are quite there yet.
Are there any documents that whose progress is blocked on time tag?
There are several proposals for such documents. So of course the next thing after a time tag is that you want to have something like signed timestamps. So that's interesting for REDs, for instance. But I cannot fully answer that question. It would be nice if Henk could be here, but Henk and Thomas are in some other meeting right now, so they have a standing conflict with our regular interim time. That's maybe something we can discuss at IETF 116.
Which means that I put time tag down on the agenda
Yes, please.
for IETF 116.
Yes.
Okay. That's a good status as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, keeping it here won't do any harm, especially if the direction forward is unclear. So yeah, we should still manage to advance things quickly if a pressing need arises.
Yeah, I mean, if nothing gets done on the sedate side, we just throw out the sedate extensions that are in this draft and do another draft with the sedate extensions when that is getting completed.
Which would also mean that timestamps could use the first draft already, or do they
Yeah,
do they also need properties from sedate?
Probably not initially. They probably don't need to be able to indicate that the signed timestamp is on the Hebrew calendar.
Yeah. Okay. Was that the thing that you wanted to mention on time tag?
Yes.
Because if so, let's continue with CDL2.
Yeah. So we had several interim meetings with segments about CDL2. And to me, it seems we are converging on a pretty well-defined plan what we want to achieve in this year and maybe even in early 2024. So let me quickly talk about this plan, and then we can use the old adage that no plan survives the first contact with, well, enemy doesn't apply here, but with the real world or something. So in the CDL2 draft document, we have a number of grammar fixes. Some of these are errata fixes. Some of these are genuine omissions in the original CDL syntax. The non-literal tags are the omission we should be addressing now because we understand it. And there's another very simple change which allows empty files because it's useful to be able to use empty files in the CDDL2 environment. So that could be extracted from the draft. And of course, we probably need to do a little bit more checking on this, but it should be easy to get this shipped before IETF 117. So in particular, the non-literal tags turn out to be pretty important at this point in time. And since we understand how this needs to be done, I think it would be good to bundle this up with the errata fixes and the empty files thing. So that's something that I would call CDDL 1.1 because it's not sweeping changes, it's just fixes and things we forgot to do in the original CDDL. So yeah, let's do them now. In parallel to that, we also have this defined extension point control operators, and the more control draft defines a few more control operators that turned out to be useful in various work where we are interacting with other data representations. So for instance, being able to say that something is encoded as a base 64 string, base 64 text string is useful. And we are right now getting feedback from people who want to use this. So that's also something that is already implemented in the way that it's in the draft, but probably will get a little bit of additional feedback before we can define this. So this is, I mean, everybody can define control operators. This is a registry, but having a few more that are a little bit more official and are tailored to be used in specifications in the IETF is useful. So I would try to get this into a bundle with grammar fixes. And yeah, there's precedent for that. We already did 9165 as another set of control operators, and this would just be the second document in that series. So that's short term, and I like to call this CDDL 1.1 because it's not really not changing much. Then we have of the CDDL 2.0 discussion, we have the modules discussion, and at the start of the hallway part of this meeting, I showed a few slides with examples how this module stuff looks like at the moment. So the feedback has been generally positive, although it's clear that there are things in CDDL that would benefit from more composability as well. So I would expect that we will need a little bit longer to finish that than the grammar fixes and control operators part. But we should be done before IETF, well before IETF 118, I think. Again, it's implemented. We have a draft, so it's we are no longer in the finding out what we actually want to do phase. We are in the actually doing it phase. So that would be the CDDL 2.0 part, and then of the various things that are left in the freezer and the CDDL2 draft document. The next item quite obviously are annotations and ways of using annotations. And that's something where we all have wild ideas, but I think we haven't really started to bring our wild ideas together and see what we can do with it and whether that's useful and so on. So annotations is not a new idea, of course. RelaxNG has annotations, so that's kind of a minimal backstop we can have. If we don't have any good ideas, we just steal the RelaxNG annotations, and that would be section 3 of the CDDL2 draft. And of course, one of the annotations that we want to have is being able to put in co-occurrence constraints, like Schematron provides them via annotations to RelaxNG. But yeah, of course, not for XML, but for JSON CBOR-like data. And I mentioned that the JSON path is producing something that might go into that as well, so that would flow together. So this is the roadmap I have in mind for the mainline. And let me quickly show the not so mainline part. We probably want to get some interoperability and tool integration, and there is a section in the freezer document that shows a CDDL in JSON format, and we probably want to agree on that. I mean, this is not for the actual interchange of the data that are described by CDDL, but it's for interchange of CDDL between tools, and that is useful if we can agree on the right way to do this. So CDLC already defined such a format, and I think this can be improved on. And but it's something that will naturally fall out of the implementation work. So I would expect we will have that together with CDDL 2.0 and should just decide to actually write this up. And I'm putting the letter I here for informational, because it's not really something that we need to standardize, but it's still something we want to agree on. The second item is collecting CDDL models from RFCs. So the CDLC tool comes with a collection of models from existing RFCs, which isn't complete, but it's a start. I think some 20 CDL models are in there. And we probably want to make them available in a way that we actually can reference them. Russ?
Thank you. You know, the Yang guys have this thing, yangcatalog.org. Are you familiar with it?
Yes.
Okay, so I wonder if we should be thinking about ccdlcatalog.org. Wouldn't that provide an infrastructure for other STOs as well as the IETF to provide those modules in a way that everybody can find them? It's just a brainstorm.
Well, I have an answer for that, but maybe other people have an opinion on that as well. So my view is that it would be great to have something like yangcatalog.org. Yangcatalog.org is not an IETF activity. It's closely cooperating with the IETF, but it's really an independent organization that just does things that are extremely useful for the IETF and vice versa.
Well, that's not 100% true, because it's run by the IETF tools team, and the IETF LLC funds it.
Yes.
So it's in that gray space. I recognize that.
Both statements are true.
Correct. Correct.
So
But
you just provided the other side of the coin. Yeah, but
exactly.
still, we would probably need to think about how this CDL catalog would work in such a way that it can be as useful as yangcatalog.org without being entirely dominated by IETF processes.
Indeed. In fact, Yang Catalog went through a struggle with that for a little while, but came to a place that IETF and IEEE 802 are now both comfortable, and all the IPR stuff's been sorted out.
Great. So we can learn a lot there.
Yes, exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. So I think that putting this on the list as something we want to achieve is definitely a good idea. I'm not sure that this makes the draft I was talking about superfluous, because the CDL models draft would essentially be referenceable in IETF and other SDO documents. I'm not sure whether we would achieve that with a CDL catalog.org. So there would be some work that brings the models that have been defined in the last 6 or 7 years up to a level that they are easily referenceable. So it's not just saving these models in a repository, but it's really about making sure that we can get a good reusability out of them. Great, but that's a useful observation. Okay, so the two I's here are pretty important from my point of view, there are 3 more items that I would think are useful, but maybe are a little bit more on the back burner. One is the literals issue, application-specific literals. So sometimes you want to write something into a CDDL document that is really tedious to write in CBOR diagnostic notation or in the CDDL equivalent of that. And it would be nice to have a notation for that. And there is a separate draft already that has similar ideas for the extended diagnostic notation that's part of CBOR. So we probably want to bring this together in a way and see what we can put there. So the point here, of course, would be to have that in an extensible way. You would be able to register a prefix for these things. And so somebody like something like the CRI document, draft IETF core href, could simply define a way to notate CRIs that looks better on whiteboards than the fully rolled out CBOR for that. So at some point, a CDDL tool should be able to consume these literals. Number 4 is an attempt to write up how a useful process, how we actually deal with numbers out of number spaces that Ayana actually has to allocate during the development of drafts. So if you haven't seen that document, that would be great if you have a look at it and comment on it. This doesn't even have to be published as an RFC, but has already turned out to be useful to point other people to as a way of solving that problem, so that an internet draft doesn't look like it's squatting on numbers. And finally, I know that's probably not that important for IETF documents, but there are so many things that are done in CSV and comma-separated variables, comma-separated values tables, and CDDL is extremely useful for those. So I wrote this up at some point, and I don't know whether we as a working group are interested in this. I would be interested in feedback whether people consider this useful. So just for fun, I took the core SID format and defined, which is done in JSON using a Yang model. And I did a CSV version of that and actually provided CDDL for that CSV version. And well, you can put this stuff into Excel. So it's really great to use during development.
Is that a feature or a bug?
I think it's a feature.
More seriously, we are approaching the end of the time. That DCBOR block, is that something you want to spend many words on? Because if so,
well,
we
the
might
people
want to...
aren't here.
Okay, right. So this is merely pointers, and then we'll just need a minute or two for the agenda items, because I think that will be a very short one. Okay, so please go on.
Let me just quickly say it's really fun to look at their YouTube presentation, on DCBOR. I rarely look at YouTube presentations that I can essentially check off almost all slides off. There's one slide where I would have comments on, but everything else is really nice. So send this presentation to other people who are trying to understand why people are using a CBOR and what way they are using it. That's pretty good. Anyway, so yeah, any comments on this CSV thing? Marco?
I have a comment, but on draft numbers. So I read version 0 of the draft. Thanks for writing it. I was wondering, and I saw also in the mailing list, you consider especially CBOR maps to give examples, and you focus on the identifiers used for the map keys, but can the same approach be used also for the map values?
Yeah, so you mean essentially what are enums in other documents, in other languages?
Well, the value of a map item can also be made up in the document and waiting for registration, and that's probably more tricky to phrase in a dynamic way that can be replaced later on.
Okay,
but I try to elaborate that in the mail I sent on the list anyway.
Yeah. So this is still on my list of drafts I want to revise once before the cutoff. I
Thank
look
you.
at that. That's a very good point. Okay. So now I would like to ask whether the mainline plan plus augmented by the information what we are not doing in the mainline because we are doing in these other documents, whether that looks like a good way forward. Of course, we can refine this plan at any point in time, but it would be good to know whether that is something we want to go forward on.
That's a question to everyone.
Yes. Ira.
I wanted to ask, is CDDL 2.5 really CDDL 2.5 a second RFC and document, or is it work in 2024 on a CDDL 2.0 that is not published until 20?
Well, how we use these numbers is up to us. What I wanted to say on this slide is that I think we can get the modules stuff done before we get the annotation stuff done.
Right.
I may be pleasantly surprised, but this is my current working assumption.
What I was really wondering was whether we were going to move towards an RFC yet this year for CDDL 2.0.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
We may not call it CDDL 2.0. We may call it a module system for CDDL or something.
Right.
But yes, people need this. People are starting to use it.
Right.
So we should finish that quickly.
That was my question, not just for IETF work, but some other in TCG and elsewhere.
There was a positive comment on the chat as well. So yeah, looks like a good roadmap to continue on.
Great. Oh, now one of the DCBOR people is coming in. We have 50 seconds left.
Hello? So
may have had a time zone problem there.
Yep. I suggest we briefly wrap up the things that we can kind of officially do, and we can then still use the time that the room is open if people are still around to at least coordinate a bit further. On the agenda for the IETF 116, because that is something that we need that we should get a good grasp on today. Time tag already has a good slot there. CDDL2 will, as I understand this roadmap, need both some general talking time about the directions and some time for individual documents. Carsten, do you have preferences? Which one you would like to? Are there concrete ones that you want to prioritize in presenting?
Yeah, I think the grammar fixes and the control operators we can do on the mailing list. So unless we run into a major discussion point there, this should probably just be a dissemination thing, and we probably should focus on the modules part, and we definitely won't have good input for the annotations yet. So the first 3 items on the slide we are looking at, I think, should go on 116, possibly with some of the next slide. But the first 3 are the ones where we really want to make progress. So obviously, for all 3, working group adoption is necessary next step, and yeah, I leave it to the chairs to decide how we are going to do this.
I'll definitely take them in with the goal of working group adoption. The outcome will be basically be a result of 116.
Good. And for the second slide, yeah, I think maybe the draft numbers thing is worth some discussion. But I think the others are really items that can be done very well on the mailing list and in future interims.
Draft numbers sounds like something that might be interesting also to a broader art audience.
Yeah.
Maybe we should make a point to emphasize that when sending out the agenda.
Sounds good.
That I think we're a bit over time and done with the agenda points. So I'd like to conclude the official part of the meeting, but also welcome Wolf, who has joined us. Was there an issue with the time zones? Would you present? Were you coming here to talk about CBOR?
Hello.
Yeah. Hello.
Good morning. Good morning here where I am. Yes. Well, I don't. Apparently, there was some miscommunication about the times or time zones, and I was expecting it to be at 7:30 a.m. Pacific time, and I apparently didn't get the link in time as well. So, you know, I'm happy to either answer any questions people have if they have time and want to stick around for that. I think we are planning on coming to the next IETF general meeting. At that point, we're just about to publish the internet draft for our recommendations and practices for deterministic CBOR. And so, you know, I'm at your service if you have any initial questions. I can also post a link to the editor's draft on GitHub Docs if you like right now, but it will be up as an internet draft on Data Tracker shortly.
Given that shortly means by the start of next week, I think that would be a good starting point. Seeing that people are not leaving yet, and frankly, I haven't managed to follow the discussion. Could you give while people are still here, just a brief intro to what you're doing and what the goals are?
Yeah. So obviously, well, Blockchain Commons, I'm the lead researcher for Blockchain Commons, is a nonprofit working in, as it suggests, the name suggests, in the blockchain space. We're trying to help wallet developers, but also other kinds of developers who work with either cryptography or secure kinds of documents, not have to reinvent the wheel in a lot of cases. And the stack of technologies we've been developing, which is entirely open source, we've often had the need to serialize various kinds of data, and we want to do it in a very kind of stable way, because when we're talking about possibly hashing or even things like signing or encrypting, the actual stability of the data is very important, especially if there's going to be many people who are verifying documents, or in the case of our Gordian envelope standard or proposal, that even like the user can elide parts of the document, and that relies on a Merkle tree that's baked into the document. And so we as we're developing these things, we've done a number of CBOR structures that we've published on our GitHub repo, on our research repo. And then when we developed Gordian envelope, we decided that, okay, we need to make sure that the binary level that we're basing this on is very stable. And so we not only went with CBOR, but we started to zoom in on the deterministic aspect of CBOR. And as we started looking for, because obviously we'd like people to adopt these structures, we wanted to make it so that, and as an engineer for over 40 years, I personally want APIs and structures and so on that are inviting and easy to use. And some of the alternatives in the space, like JSON LD and so on, are just in my humble opinion, a bit of a mess and very hard to approach in many ways. And I want something that was easier to approach, both on an API level as well as the actual structure. So CBOR was an obvious choice. Actually, it took us a little research to decide that CBOR was the obvious choice, but we landed on that. But the deterministic specification did have a number of loose ends to it that we realized we would like to kind of tighten up. And so we actually implemented, we have a Rust and a Swift implementation of our deterministic CBOR. And then we realized, okay, well, we definitely need to document this. And so that has become our internet draft that will actually probably be published as a 00 within an hour. And mostly it's about things like it's a set of requirements primarily for codecs for CBOR, both in terms of things that DCBOR codecs must implement, and also a suggested set of best practices for codec implementers. It's not actually a replacement or a different dialect of CBOR itself, and everything that conforms to DCBOR is decodable as straight CBOR. Not everything that is encoded as CBOR is validatable as DCBOR. For instance, obviously CBOR allows out of order map keys, whereas we require map keys to be in order. And we want to put as much burden on the actual codec and remove as much burden as possible from the engineer working with the API. So there's certain things that we are requiring the codec to do that is DCBOR compliant, and other things that we are admonishing the developers to do because the codec can't do them. But that's both of those are in the internet draft. With that said, I'd be happy to answer other questions or go in other directions if you wish.
Thanks. That was a great, quick overview. I think so. I, for my part, will have to digest that in order to raise any questions. But those around who are quicker than me or might have experience. Yep. It does encourage reading the draft. Yep.
Very good. Well, that should be within an hour.
And the YouTube videos, as I said, while you weren't there, I mentioned that I looked at one of your YouTube videos, and this must have been one of the few YouTube videos in my life that I watched and could have signed every slide except for one.
Wow, thank you. I'm flattered. Yeah, the Blockchain Commons YouTube channel does have a number of videos up on both our technologies and the various technological choices we've been making and our motivations for those. And and I always want to make sure that we're building on the best of what already exists and inventing as little as possible. But when we do, we want to make sure our motivations for our inventions and new proposals are clear.
Seeing no further questions being raised, I think we can call it a day. Thank you. Thanks, Carsten, and thank you, Marco, for taking minutes, especially when I was not yet here. And see you all either physically or remotely in Yokohama.
Thank you.
Till then.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.